this is, or we're seeing this, in Iran, or is there anything there? And so, there's a whole big ops floor. So I'm a brand new second lieutenant, and I'm in charge of like this $6.4 billion weapon system. And I'm up there with tech sergeants and master sergeants, and sitting beside a T or a captain, or if my squadron commander happened to sit on the ops floor at the same time I am, she's there as an O5 or an 06. And then you got this like 22-person weapon system, and all of the ground control and the space links and the cyber links to the whole thing. And you as a young LT are in charge of the whole damn thing. So it's pretty huge. And so it took a while to kind of adjust to that. But I did that for a couple of years. I deployed from there. I went up to the CAOC, the Combined Air and Space Ops Center, out at Al Udeid, which is in Qatar. I was the space duty officer there at the AOC. So any kind of ops that we were doing in CENTCOM, space-related stuff, I was like linking into all of that. So if we had a PR incident, if a pilot went down, there was a down aircraft, we're trying to get the pilot back, you would have a radio that you would, have to signal on, like prick 112, and so we would pick up that and relay that. We did a lot of the missile warning and defense and all the space kind of stuff. We brought it out to CENTCOM for that. And then kind of wrapping that stuff up, after that, I went out to California. I taught IQT, the system that I worked at for a couple of years.
So tech school.
I taught at tech school. So I did that for a couple of years, got deployed again, and then got married, honeymooned out to Hawaii, and then got orders to Hawaii. It was great. That's the way to do it. When your wife says, "Take me back to Hawaii," then you can say, "Honey, I got orders to Hawaii." That's yeah. And for that, I'll take a quick side note. You're doing this for the public service and all that, but don't forget to advocate for yourself as you're going through your career. Why I was able to get the Hawaii job is because on one of my deployments, when I went out to the CAOC and was doing that stuff, I told the assignments team, "Hey, I learned a lot from that. There's a job opening in Hawaii doing a similar type of thing. Let me use my experience here to go to Hawaii." And they're like, "Brian, that's a great idea." I said, "Yes, it is." Yes, it is. So use what you've done, whether it's stuff that you want to do or not, to your advantage throughout your career. So little side note there. So when I was in Hawaii, I worked at the AOC there. It wasn't a 24/7 op center like in CENTCOM. I worked at PACAF, which is the Pacific Air Forces. So it was a MAGCOM kind of assignment. And I worked combat plans and then strategy. I did that in the AOC kind of context for 3 years. And then I was the exec for the 2-star vice commander of PACAF for the final year. It's kind of going through, so if there's any kind of questions on any of this after I'm done, just feel free to pepper me with that stuff. I'd never done, I was an exec for an 06 before that, but the execing for the 2-star was a whole other big ball game. And that was the same year as the Trump and KJU Fire and Fury year, where we thought we might go to war with North Korea and it was just going to be awful. And so my boss was one of the guys from PACAF that got assigned to go up to Indo-PACOM 2 or 3 times a week to, I don't know, in Avengers, where Samuel L. Jackson is talking to all the floating heads on the wall and talking about like the nuclear bomb and the aliens and all that. And it was like that, but it was like 30 floating heads from like the Undersecretary of Defense or the Secretary of Defense chairman, and everybody talking about how terrible the Korea plan and all the gaps and seams and what we have to do and how terrible this is all going to be if we actually have to do it. And so we would do that a couple of times a week. And so, I'd be driving up there. Fortunately, I got to sit into a lot of those meetings. So then after that, went off, did Air Command and Staff College. I did that for a year.
Major school.
Yeah.
Major school.
And so I was part of the inaugural class of the what was called the Schriever Space Scholars. So in that year-long course, they have these shred out concentrations of like, some nuke guys would just do like nuclear strategy for a full year. Some people would do like a PAO concentration. We did like a space concentration. So where everybody else was doing a full year of like Air Power 1, Air Power 2, and they're learning about linebacker and the air power strategies for Vietnam and stuff like that, we were learning space power strategies and space history, and we did a full top secret SCI, no foreign course, and all kinds of like cool stuff that no one else kind of was talking about for that year. Then after that, I went out to Peterson to go stand up U.S. Space Command. And from here, I'll kind of like stop a bit. But there's like two separate things that happened that a lot of the public kind of gets confused on. We stood up the U.S. Space Force. That is the service that I'm a part of. And then we stood up the Combatant Command, which is U.S. Space Command. And how I kind of explain it to people is U.S. Space Force is the service. So it does the organized training and equipping, right? Do you need a satellite? Do you need a person in a uniform to go operate the satellite? Great, we'll get that all squared away, and then we will present that to the COCOM, U.S. Space Command, to use the toy and the person to go fight the war. And so U.S. Space Command, we're saying, hey, it'd be cool if we can use this satellite and do this, and whoa, do that. And as part of the effort that UCOM is doing to turn to defend, Ukraine, what Moscow's doing. And so U.S. Space Force isn't the one doing that, the Combatant Command is. And so with all of the stuff, if a NATO conflict were to go off, UCOM and the UCOM commander would be the one actually doing the fight. And then the Air Force and the Army and the Navy would present forces to them to do that fight, if that makes sense. So I'll take a pause. I got another fun story in a bit, but Travis, you want to
Yeah.
a little bit of yourself?
So, Travis, I'm John Mark's brother, or Captain Promotable.
Y'all can call me John.
Captain Promotable.
Shut up.
So I started out.
Yeah.
I started out in the National Guard. Started out as a 12 Alpha or engineer officer, and Army engineers, totally different than what y'all have. We make roads, or we blow up roads, or we blow up buildings, or we don't really make buildings. We mostly get stuff out of the way. We can build like a tactical airfield. So I did that for a time with the National Guard. Jumped around different states. I don't suggest anybody does that if you are going. I'm sure none of y'all are going to the Guard, but
They might.
and maybe. So anyway, did that for a time. Got caught up on several state missions doing flood relief, hurricane relief, kind of the typical National Guard commercial disaster relief type things. I did my platoon time with the Guard as a PL, and then several different staff positions. I did a deployment to mitigate ISIS incursion into Jordan. That wasn't necessarily engineer related. It was just they needed some guys to do training, even though the unit that I was with, we did partner capacity, because training is a whole other lane of funding and stuff like that. So we built partner capacity with Jordan.
You're mostly in cities for that, right?
What's that?
You're mostly in cities.
We lived in Amman, and then we would drive out to the border, specifically in Syria or with Syria, and did some partner capacity with those guys there. It was a great experience. I'd go back to Jordan in a heartbeat. Met some guys there that were in this unit called Civil Affairs, not Public Affairs. Civil Affairs is a totally different thing. I didn't know about it because they don't have it in the National Guard, but they have it in the Army Reserve. These guys came out with us. They're wearing, civilian clothes. We were too, but they were wearing civilian clothes, doing a lot of, assessing what's going on in northern Jordan, reporting back, doing all this cool guy stuff. So when I came back from that deployment, I started looking into it, made the switch over to Civil Affairs. Now I'm in the Army Reserve, I'm a team leader for a Civil Affairs company. So it's a 4-man team. We go out, we start working again with our partners, nation partners, host nations, stuff like that, we take the civilians that may be on the battlefield and try to come up with, plans for that. Because a lot of times, let's say Ukraine, nobody is taking into consideration what's going on with the civilians there. They're either in the way or, being used in a negative way. We try to figure out ways that we can help pull them off that battlefield. And that's just a real down and dirty explanation of that. And so I'm going on a deployment soon to Europe to work with NATO to do some more civil affairs type stuff. So that's just a real quick explanation of me. But if y'all have questions about Joe Mark and what he was like, I'm sure you have a lot more questions about that. So I need to leave the room.
Embarrassing story.
I want you to
Embarrassing
be
story.
I want you to be
Any military related questions? We might have time for something fun at the end. Over to you guys, go.
Major Yoakum?
Yep.
As far, because you're space ops, right?
Yep.
Officer. How, because I'm trying to go space as well.
Great.
If I do, it'd be under developmental engineering. So what's your experience if you have any kind of interfacing with DevEs or kind of what they do and how they enjoy their time and their work?
Yeah, not a lot of experience with those guys, but when I worked at the squadron doing Sibbers, we worked with them quite a bit. We went out to California and worked with the DevOps folks. For any kind of weapons system, they do software updates, and so ours is a big one. And so we would have to, me and a crew of 3 or 4 other people went out from Denver to LA and tested the software that was going to be dropped. And so, we kind of did all kinds of simulations and all that kind of cool stuff to try to test it as much as possible. We work with them of like, hey, it'd be good if we could actually do this and change this. And so it was, a week or 10-day long thing of working with them of trying to get the software as refined and as operator friendly as possible.
Yes, sir.
But there was an engineering shop within the squadron itself doing a lot of the more intricate satellite command and control, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And then they worked daily with the DevOps folks back in California. And so whenever the weapons and tactics guys and the training folks, they all kind of worked together and identified any kind of software things that either weren't working right or things that they could improve upon that the software wasn't showing.
Yes, sir.
We kind of liaised with the DOE shop to work with DevOps folks back in California. So it's an iterative process, and the best squadrons have really good relationships with those folks. And so it shouldn't be one of those things that they're only talking to them when things go bad.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Demetrio, could you speak on like your employability in the civilian world based on your experience specifically in space?
Yeah, so in general, for Space Force folks, it's broadly as a service, it's going to be tough to keep Space Force people because of all the training and then the TS. Almost everything I do is on JWICS terminals, which are top secret terminals. So you got like just your normal laptop that's a MeperNet, and then you got SemperNet, which is for secret stuff, and then you got JWICS terminals, which is for TS stuff. Space Force right now, everything is up on JWICS, if not higher. And all that to say is that the Space Force is putting a lot of time and effort to develop you guys. So ROTC's a 4-year gig, the Air Force Academy is a 4-year gig. And once you join the Air Force or go space, it's much more time intensive as well. You're learning all this cool stuff that 99% of the Air Force has no idea what's going on. And so once you get to that point, you become very valuable on the outside as well. And so that's why a lot of our locations are Florida, Colorado, California, and not places like North Dakota or
That's what I'm talking about.
I want to get any trouble or other kind of, not too Gucci places. But yeah, that's an overarching kind of problem set. And so the Space Force right now is trying to identify ways to retain the people. The pilot side, they've kind of worked that out because the airlines are trying to, get pilots to come out of the Air Force and fly with them. And so there are bonuses and all that kind of stuff with pilots. But then once you do that, then you're flying commercial for years and years, and that's what you're doing. You're flying everywhere, and then you're on the road or in the air a lot. That's what you want to do. That's great. But once you start having family and things like that, you kind of want to not be away for that amount of time. So the Space Force, it's still brand new. I've been transferred 2 years ago. And so they're trying to work out all of how are we going to retain the folks that we have and recruit new folks. And so a lot of that is still in the works of, are we going to do something with bonuses like pilots have?
Has the big exodus happened yet of those that were forced to transfer?
No, most everybody transferred.
No, I know that, but the previous APAS here was also Space Force, and a lot of people had to, and he was saying that there was an anticipated departure once those initial service commitments in the new force were up. People would just be like, deuces.
I've not seen that. But hopefully that answered your question.
I have a question for the other Captain Junkins. Would civil affairs, would allied civilian combatants fall under that, like handling relations with paramilitary groups in Syria?
Yeah, so, and I didn't explain it too in depth, but like we would work with, like on the active side of the Army Civil Affairs, they are specifically SF aligned. Reserve, we could potentially find ourselves dealing with SF stuff, but typically we're dealing with conventional forces, so just your regular Army. But we would work with NGOs, like just the example I gave him earlier is, in Afghanistan, sure, you have a government in Kabul, but they're not doing anything for, some random village out in Coast Province or something like that. So these guys, we would be out there trying to provide governance for these either displaced people or regular citizens of that country or that territory or whatever the area is being called at that time, trying to help them set up their own governance. So it's a lot of there's a lot of overlap with the embassy, with different agencies, like working with DIA and or USAID or somebody like that. So I'm going to take uniforms on this deployment. I'm going to wear a lot of civilian clothes, but I'm also going to be, at the embassy a lot, trying to, and then I'm also deconflicting a lot of, well, this is how we understand, how aid gets provided. When this is how the Army understands this, how aid gets provided. I'm the middleman that helps translate all that.
Yes, sir. So would that make there's a lot of linguists in the career field?
Yes, yeah. So for the active duty, you were required a language. For the reserve, I am able to go to a language school. It's just harder as a reservist because we don't get nearly as much money. And it's harder to put us on orders for however long it takes to learn a language. But those assets are there.
Sir, thank you.
I have a question for Lieutenant Fisher. What would you say the most difficult what was the most difficult part of transitioning from here to active duty? And then is there anything we can do at the detachment to help mitigate the issues you face?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I was actually just recently talking to Lieutenant Valera. And she recently started tech school or intel school as well. And we were kind of deciphering between that because she knew I was coming here. And I think the hardest part, I don't know if that's something that we can do with the detachment, but like you're training for so long to become a lieutenant, and like ROTC in general, it's easy to excel at it because you're doing very tactical things that you can master quite fast. But you're also like, it's just set up really nice where you're like, okay, my hand is being held freshman, sophomore year basically. And then junior, senior year, you're finally being able to like learn your leadership style and learn how to lead others, which is humongous. And so like the challenge of like, okay, I am doing really well. I'm at this very high as a senior. Like I feel like I have my feet under me, and like the weight of being an officer hasn't really landed on you yet. And so by the time you go to your shop or wherever you go, all of a sudden you're like hit with this, like I am the officer. Like I am someone that someone looks up to, even though like I don't know what my job is. Like I like for public affairs, I don't go to a tech school right off the bat. I went to my shop and the commander was like, "Oh, good, you're here." And I'm like, "Yes, but like, please understand, I don't know anything. I don't know people." And so I think that that's just kind of hard. And I think that's just like a hard realization that you kind of need to come to terms with, that the weight of being an officer. Yes, you're a second lieutenant. Yes, people should know that you don't know a lot, but like my A1Cs expect me to lead them, even though I don't directly supervise them. If that answers your question, yeah.
That happens every 3 years when you go to a new assignment, or you go to a new shop,
Or a new career field.
or a new career field. And really what people above you expect is that you're a competent person with good manners, you know how to talk to people, you have good interpersonal skills, you know how to take an assignment and understand it and run with it and try your best. And if you have questions, to ask questions. And, that's a big thing too, because they're going to see your rank and they're going to understand that you're a second lieutenant, but they're also going to know that you're an officer and you're expected to, do the things that we expect of you, to do the things that I just kind of laid out. And so there's kind of that back and forth, but you kind of have to not fake it till you make it, but you kind of have to like work through it until you kind of know more than the other people around you.
If I could jump in on that real quick, especially when Brian, here's your Yoakum, okay. Years later, I guess. He rattled off a lot of acronyms and terms, right? I bet some of you understood some of them, and some of you understood very few of them. You did a good job of explaining, but the expectation isn't that you know everything about the military as soon as you're on active duty. We're training, like you said, those soft skills. When you're an officer, you're qualified to make good decisions, learn quickly, network, find the right answer. Like that's all that you need. And I think we were talking, because I asked you the same question like 6 months ago. Like, what can we do now that you've been on the job to teach them, prepare them more? And you said to not downplay being a lieutenant as much. And a lot of times we say, you're dumb when you're I say it a lot, like, no, you're gonna be a dumb lieutenant, and it's a great thing to be. That just means that you don't know the mission right away. You made the great point that you still are expected to know how to be an officer immediately, because you got faced with some difficult admin stuff like right out the gate, and people were kind of playing into she's just the lieutenant, she just got here, and you had to kind of put the kibosh on, like, actually I'm the officer in the room. So yeah, when we say that, we're not, it's not like you aren't learning things, like you just have more to learn once you get there, and you'll learn it when you get there, but you're learning the things that you need to learn now to be prepared for that.
I have a quick story. So I helped stand up U.S. Space Command over the last 2.5 years. And one of my jobs right now is every combatant command globally, whether it's the EUCOM commander or the Indo-PACOM commander, one of their responsibilities is to determine if there is an attack going on within their AOR, their area of responsibility. So, if Iran launches some Scuds into Jordan, the CENTCOM commander is going to be rung out on what's called a Vol 6 conference. And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the Secretary of Defense, they're all going to be, their aides are going to get them onto the net and get them on. And the CENTCOM commander is going to have to decide, are CENTCOM assets under attack or not? And so that's one of my jobs is we have a cadre of general officers who are what are called space attack assessors. And so if there is an attack happening within our AOR, the space domain, their job is to work with the ops crew to determine if there's an attack going on or not. All that to say, I was, remember back in October when Moscow, they launched an anti-satellite rocket at one of their own satellites. It hit it, there was debris everywhere. So one of my jobs was preparing the ops crew for that, as well as preparing my boss's boss, the 4-star, when he got on to the conference to speak to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the Secretary of Defense. So I worked side by side with our PAO shop, our PA shop. So the PA shop had worked with the SecDef's office on, unclassified talking points, how we were going to express, what U.S. Spacecom was doing. And the PA shop was working with the SecDef's office and the Secretary of State's office, because if they did this, then the Secretary of State was going to go and take the lead on condemning Moscow's action and work on a whole allied response that this is unsafe behavior in space, yada, yada, all that kind of stuff. And so what I did is I worked on the top secret talking points that the 4-star would relay to the chairman and to the SecDef while they were on the conference. So if this happened, then these would have been talking points. If this happened, then these would have been talking points. So that was very exciting. And then I happened to be, I was asked to be the ops guy when the event actually happened. We had some intel indicating that we kind of knew when it might happen. And so I was the guy on the floor talking with US Space Com's functional components. So the components that were supporting the combatant command. And so I was like the first one to hear that it actually struck and it's now in pieces. And so I was relaying that to the 4-star and his whole senior battle staff. And then so then he relayed that to the Secretary of Defense and then the chairman. They got a good handle of what that was. And then the SecDef said, okay, thank you. I think I have all I need to know. I'm going to go let the president know. And let the president and the Secretary of State know. And then there was a media release the following morning in conjunction with all of our allies. So we took the lead. But then as soon as we did, Great Britain and Germany, a bunch of NATO countries, Australia, Canada, all came out in kind of identical language condemning this unsafe behavior in space. That's one of the cool things. So we saw the launch, we saw, we saw the impact, all that kind of stuff.
Were you the highest ranking on the ops board at the time?
No, I was, so I was working alongside 06, a full-bird colonel. And so we're kind of relaying info back and forth. And then what I was typing on was projected in the room adjacent to where we were with the 4-star there and the whole senior battle staff. And so there was, 1 stars kind of running back and forth to me and back and like, what's going on? And trying to determine its current status and then way forward and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, cool story.
Question here, kind of for the whole panel here, but could you speak on any sort of professional development that you've done outside of your job that has been prevalent or relevant in your career so far?
Like military provided or something they did on their own?
Specifically on your own.
So
They can kind of be both for your masters.
yeah, so I did a master. I did like a aerospace science master's once I got in, and then you go to squadron officer school. You're captain and residence. So you kind of do that online first.
Not anymore.
No,
You're that old. Yeah.
I'm not old. And then, and so you go in residence to squadron officer school. And for me, it was an 8-week program. So it was like a 2-month course. And then when you're a major, you do Air Command and Staff College. And I think that is still online first. And then you can do that as soon as you get a line number for 04. So John Mark can start doing it whenever he wants or not. And then once you're done with that, you can get picked up to go in residence. And so I got picked up to do that. But there's a whole wide variety of options for intermediate developmental education. So that's the Air Command and Staff College part. So you can go to the Air Force equivalent, down in Alabama. You could go to like a naval equivalent, Army equivalent.
There's some other internships that would qualify. I'm going to cut you out there because I don't think that's the question that he's asking. What can you
I like that, but I was I'm saying stuff like that, but also like I don't know if you are reading or consuming any media that that dovetails well with your AFSC.
Sure. I subscribe to the New York Times.
Okay.
So I would say read a wide variety. I'm also on Twitter. So, do not follow me. No, I mean, I would just say find a few reputable news sites. Recommend doing a subscription to one to support that.
I can help you out.
There we go. Stay up on current events, like that kind of thing. But I was getting to the part where I got picked up to do an advanced academic degree. So I'm going to be going to get a civilian master's in political science. So I'm doing that starting in the fall. I'll do that for a year and a half. And then I'm going to go teach at the Air Force Academy for about 3.5 years. And so that kind of dovetails into the political science aspects of kind of what I've been doing the last couple of years, just with standing up a command. And with space, we talk about, the tactical, the operational, the strategic. With space, it's all kind of weirdly compressed into the same thing. So if there's something on orbit and you're doing a tactical maneuver against another satellite, if the other satellite happens to be another country's satellite, happens to be an adversary, then that tactical maneuver could have strategic effects very quickly. So that's kind of where space kind of fits in there. But, there's tons of opportunities. As soon as you guys get in, continue to look for awesome opportunities like that, because they're always asking for people. They're always asking, hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to do this? And it's really seeing those opportunities and going for it.
Any of your engineering course, like the civilian versus?
Yeah, so I did my master's in project management. It went well with my engineering stuff that I was doing on the reserve side, but really it was, check a box. I think a lot of what, at least in my experience, what you're going to find as you go on, there's a lot of box checking. But in the, at least on the Army side, there's a lot of associations that are outside of the Army. So like there's a Civil Affairs Association, there's an Engineer Association. You're going to have, again, just on the Army side, I don't know, the Air Force Association, they probably have missile silos monthly or something like that. Join those organizations. It's a networking opportunity. Maybe you don't meet in person, but you can, hey, I recognize that name. I saw him write this article in this thing that I received twice a month or twice a year or whatever. Reach out to him, see what he thinks about this. Like, I forget who said it. Somebody said the Air Force is small. The military is small. You're going to run into the chances of us running into each other out there, slim and none, but it's not impossible, just because I'm in the Army Reserve doesn't mean that I'm not going to see somebody out there in the world. So I don't know, I'm rambling at this point, but
I can say, I think, so this is coming from the guy without a master's degree, as you all know. I like the point about like, it's all kind of combined. So great question on what sort of education could, plus up or impact your actual job as an officer. I would say everything that you do or see or experience will, and you guys should be trying to like combine it all the time. That's why we, as officers, that's why we PCS to a lot of different assignments. That's why you'll PCA within an assignment, so you can take that little slice of mission, take it to the next unit. You have enough knowledge to add on to what they're doing. Then you go to the next base. You have this previous experience. Like it all just kind of adds on to itself. So we were kind of talking about this when I was saying like how I'm going to position my career as I get out of the Air Force. Like my intel time was my operations management time. Like I led teams to run real world missions that had like significant effects, like actual lives were on the line. So you have crisis management involved with that. You have mission planning. You have just communication of operations. I can now kind of put all those feathers in my cap. Acquisitions time, project management, program management time, long-term plans, long-term milestones that I was trying to get to, coordination with geo-separated organizations. So I'm a tinker, but the customer or the contractor is in DC or Phoenix or somewhere. So just kind of how you manage people in different locations. Here, I am in charge of a training curriculum that, we have to meet actual requirements to produce officers and everything that comes with that, the stuff like this, the kind of more personal one-on-one development, individual development stuff. So I would say there's not one thing that's like, this is what I need to solve or, be even more better at my job. It's all of it should make you better, just like all the stuff that y'all read or do on the side. Like, if you've read Range, I just basically gave the bluff of Range, but yeah.
LinkedIn is a good network kind of app to get into. I got into it late in my career, but LinkedIn is like Facebook, but for professionals. And there's a lot of stuff that if you're connected to the right people, and as you go throughout your career and you're finding the right people to have a network link with, then you will see a lot of like professional development stuff that might be outside the normal, like Air Force pipeline type stuff, that could still help you in your career or outside your career, depending on if you want to get out or not. But I would say that's a big one too. So I've only been on there for like a year and a half, 2 years now. But there's a lot of good opportunities on there as long as you're, following the right people. You know what I mean?
Not to piggyback, but use everything, because Ryan and I were talking. We've never worked together. This is actually, I'm pretty sure maybe the first time we've seen each other in uniform, because every time we hung out was at the beach.
I wasn't totally sure who was in the
And we only knew each other. We were stationed together against a long time, but we didn't know that. We only met like 3 months before I left Hawaii, and then just hit it off, stayed in contact, and now lo and behold, I have a Space Force officer to put in front of all of you. So, NCLS, when we were up there, hung out with the C-17 crew that did one of the sessions there. They came into the HAPS bar while I was feeding Ben Carson at pool. And then they were like, hey, you want to get drinks? And so we did. And I've been able to put one of them in contact with a cadet to be like, hey, they have questions about this. Would you mind answering? So that was just like a month ago. Cool.
I can tie in a bow though, but I did a flight leadership class. I'm not a flight commander. I probably won't be a flight commander, but I got to be in a network of different people from different shops in the base. So again, it's just really nice. And I learned a lot from that class, even though it won't apply to me now. So it's just like tools in the toolbox. Just to volunteer for things that you're like, that does not apply to me, but it probably will sometime, some way. Or if someone asks you a question about it, you can have it for them.
Somebody had a hand raised?
Yes, Major come again. The Space Force, after it's been established, kind of had the opportunity to kind of redefine what it means to be like the modern military force. And I've seen, based on the publications, that there is a big push for that. How have you seen that kind of developing over the first, introductory 2 years? I've heard kind of mixed reviews, but I'd like to hear your take on it.
It's tough. So organizations are hard to change. And the bigger the organization, the harder it is to change. And so we were part of the Air Force for 30, 40 years, right? So Air Force Space Command was kind of that's what it grew out of. And so Air Force Space Command was doing a lot of the organized training and equip part of it. We weren't using our space assets to like go fight wars because there wasn't really that threat in the domain. Moscow and Beijing now have assets on orbit, counter space assets that can hold our stuff at risk. They can, the anti-satellite rocket that I talked to you about, from the land up to the domain, the stuff actually on orbit that could crash into stuff or shoot laser beams or RF energy out and disrupt what we're doing.
Yes, sir.
So there was a need for that. And so carving that out of the Air Force to go and create something else, the goodness straight off the bat was all the people in power saw the struggles that the other services had and wanted to set it on a course right off the bat on what they thought would mitigate the obstacles and some of the hazards that the other services have seen. And so it's kind of pushing the ship in the right way, but it's still in its infancy. And so for a big organization like this, you're not going to see any kind of big changes for the first 5 years, 10 years. And then you start seeing that. But the idea is for the Space Force, more of a digital fluency with the force, as well as a more iterative understanding of what physical fitness means. And I don't know if you've seen this, but they just kind of announced they're working on something where it's like a ring or like a bracelet or something that would be synced up to your unit fitness manager. And you would have to like exert energy or, go for a run or something, once a week just to maintain that level.
That good to go indicator, right?
It's like a black mirror thing. It's
Slippery slope.
I'm sure it's very well intentioned, but there's a lot of hurdles that we still have to get to maintain, not just like that every 6 months or once a year, go run a mile and a half and go do some other stuff and then check the box.
Also, there's no way you can take those things into a ball, I would imagine.
Well, I guess they want to. So they want to be able to do that because a lot of people in that service work in vaults or vault adjacent, just go in and out, once a week or something like that. So there's a lot of good ideas, and I think they're moving the service and the people and the acquisition strategy and all that to a place that's more dynamic.
Yes, sir.
But again, it's a bigger organization that even though it's new, it was within the Air Force for 30, 40 years. So pulling that out, you're not really pulling it out. You're just kind of changing the names and you're changing the organizational structure a little bit here and there, but it's going to take a lot to move it in the direction that you want to and then get it going and it being, self-propelling.
Yes, sir.
But at least I think they're working the right way. So, and the Army's working at least the fitness requirements, but I think they just put it back on pause for another 6 months or so.
No,
A year.
they announced that, that's a whole other thing. They made another change, the ACFT, and our April 1st is that's whenever the active component needs to have a record ACFT sometime soon. So.
Now we're getting in the weeds.
Yeah.
So I think one thing that'll be interesting for you guys in your career is seeing like what that looks like for the Space Force as they kind of grow. But I doubt you'll see much change in terms of a lot of their identity stuff. Like that's why that stuff is so simple and streamlined to begin with. Like the big things that they push, and tell me if I'm wrong, like streamlining, like very kind of, not dynamic, agile, an agile force compared to the bureaucracy of the other forces. So they will probably try to stay small for as long as possible and really emphasize that agility in the terms of how a tactical decision could go, have strategic effects very quickly. So agility and kind of a small footprint will always kind of be one of their core tenets that I think they would try to hold on to. And then even simple stuff, again, we talked about it when we talked about vision statements, always above, you know, like that's just, those are nice sounding words, but it kind of at least tells them as a force, like what their mind should always be towards. So I think all the things that'll kind of be filled in is more that operational piece, like how do we actually function as a space force as the different interests around the world and needs around the world change. But I doubt you'll see much really change with those kind of underlying beliefs, don't you think? All right, we got time for either one more question or if you have
Embarrassing story. Embarrassing story.
We didn't hang out much when we were kids.
There's a 5-year gap, so.
When you were hitting high school, I was still like coming out of middle school.
I lied. I don't have any good stories, but I barely know the guy.
I was not that embarrassing as a kid.
You probably have more embarrassing stories about me. Y'all know me, so.
Fight a lot.
Yeah.
Just because you were
We
too
really
big.
just so believe each other.
Yeah. Travis was like 6 foot in 5th grade, just FYI, and I'm still not 6 foot, so there was never going to be a fair fight. So I don't think he, thankfully,
Does that get grabbed?
yeah, you would. I will give you that. I'm just faster and smarter. So
I feel like that was like a transport back to something you said when you were 10 or something, or like, but I'm faster and smarter.
Yeah.
I mean, this felt the history in that.
Typical of our relationship. Yeah, so-
Cool.
there's probably a few that you just shouldn't tell. Okay, well, we might have a quick question then.
Letting the people on the live stream